Hey guys, I'm really happy to welcome to the podcast Kari Lake. Kari is the Trump-endorsed candidate for governor of Arizona. She had a long and successful career in journalism, in fact, in TV media. I've actually been trying to get her on the podcast for a little while, so Kari, I'm delighted it's finally worked out. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. Let me begin by asking you to say a little bit about your career in television and also why you made the pivot from journalism to running for governor.
Wow. I'm so excited to be on your show, first of all, Dinesh. So let me get that out of the way. I worked for 27 years covering Arizona as a journalist, a television journalist and a news anchor, 22 at the local Fox station, number one for 22 years in people's homes for almost 3 decades here in Arizona. And I absolutely love and adore this state. But it really, obviously journalism has changed. It's no longer journalism, it's activism. It's liberal leftist activism. People in the newsroom and in newsrooms around this state and around this country are Democrats and activists for the Democrat agenda. And, I always felt I could work with people, even we had different ideologies, as long as what I was doing was on the straight and narrow. But during COVID, I really felt that it became impossible to give truthful information because the corporate media had zero interest in helping people navigate the pandemic, navigate treatment that would help them. It was really only an interest of keeping people isolated in their homes with the virus, afraid and at each other's throats. And when I realized that there was no interest in putting out news and information of full truth and fact on treatments that were working, et cetera, I realized that it was not just unethical to stay in that job, it was immoral. And so I walked away and did not plan, Dinesh, to get into the dirty, grimy world of politics, by the way.
Well, let me ask you, why do you think that this kind of dramatic change occurred within media? I mean, the media, I suppose, if you were to take a poll even 30 years ago, the majority of reporters were Democrats. They were on the left. But there was at least, it seemed, an attempt to keep the lid on, to maintain at least the appearance of balance, to have different points of view. But now it appears that they have gone full-blown ideological, and they not only actively suppress dissenting voices, but they lobby for digital censorship that will throw people off their platforms. And what I want to ask is, how do these journalists move from being maybe biased one way to being fanatics?
Well, Donald Trump got in their heads and they just couldn't handle it. I mean, Donald Trump really was the tipping point, I think, where you started to see people who could hold it together and people who just were losing their minds over the guy. But I also think of some of the more reasonable people, Dinesh, got out of it because they saw that it was pushing so far to the left. If you were middle of the road or conservative, you just said, I'm going to find a different line of work. I don't want to work in a newsroom where I don't have a voice, or the stories that I pitch that are middle of the road or conservative leaning are just shot down every single day. So a lot of people got out, and then they were replaced with younger people coming fresh out of journalism school where they're indoctrinating these kids. And I think that had a lot to do with it.
Kari, there's a clip on social media I was mentioning to you right before we turned on that there was a reporter kind of tormenting you, answer a question, and you turned very graciously and said, listen, I'd be happy to talk to you, but your network, your newspaper never provides even a modicum of balance. You're full-blown ideological on the other side, so we're not getting news or reporting out of you. Now, was it your background in journalism that gave you, because very few Republicans do this kind of thing. They just kind of run away or they won't be interviewed, but they rarely call the reporter straight to her face in this case and say, listen, why don't you cover our side fairly? Why don't you treat America like there are two legitimate political parties which have different takes on what to do about problems, and reflect both so your audience and your readers can decide?
I take on the media all the time. And if you go to my Rumble page, Kari Lake, Karilake, you'll see other examples of what you just described. They immediately, when they're interviewing a Republican or a conservative, they immediately take a stance of, we have to have a slanted piece. We have to go after them rather than just say, hey, look. And I even said this to some of the reporters covering me. This is a good story. I'm somebody who left the news walked away from a comfortable lifestyle and threw my hat in the ring to run for governor. And I'm leading in the polls. I'm doing this because I love the state. That's a great story. But no, they have to cover it with an angle where they're trying to tear me apart, turn me into something I'm not. They're calling, they're calling us racist, Nazis, all that jazz. And it's unfair. And they always do this with conservatives, but they don't ever do it with people on the left. And I called that reporter out, by the way, the one you're referring to. About a week later, I thought, you know what? I'll give her a statement. She wanted an interview. And I said, I'll give her a chance. And it was a hit piece they were doing on me. I gave her a short statement. And because my statement basically made her whole hit piece look ridiculous, it turned it on its head, she only ran a half of a sentence of my statement because she didn't want me to shatter her narrative. So I don't know. I think it's a lost cause, Dinesh. I think we're moving into a place where the corporate media, as it stands, is gone, finished, done. And they're losing viewers, and readership is going down really rapidly. And we're seeing actually people tuning into podcasts and you and many others out there to get their information, and it's more reliable.
So what you're saying is that the answer is, in a sense, to diminish the credibility of this sort of fanatical media and replace it with a kind of new ecosystem that people can genuinely trust, right? In other words, and I think that's actually very good because a lot of times conservatives will do critiques of the media, but it's one thing to critique an institution and yet be reliant on it. We critique digital media, but we're largely reliant on it. It's not until you can develop your own alternatives that you gain true independence, don't you?
Yeah. Well, look at Joe Rogan. Here he is, a podcast. He has so much viewership, I guess, listenership. I'm not sure how you word it. Way higher than even someone like a Tucker Carlson at Fox News, who is incredibly popular. So we are finding people we trust, and we're going to them for our information. And it's not the corporate media. The corporate media, the station I worked at, the market I worked in, Phoenix, is a massive market that covers pretty much 85% of Arizona. I think we've had the reach of 6.5 million people, something like that. And I got the ratings a few months ago. A friend slipped me the overnight ratings, and the number one 5 p.m. newscast was only reaching 6,000 people out of 6.5 million. So people aren't watching. They're walking away from the corrupt media. And now you know why. You know how bad it is when the corrupt media is begging these liberal politicians to help fund them now because they're not making enough money. They want us taxpayers to subsidize them because they have driven the press into the ground, and they want us to now come in and save them. And that's where I draw the line. We'll never, ever, if I can help it, be giving taxpayer money to the corporate corrupt media.
Kari, let's take a pause. When we come back, I want to talk about some very interesting ideas that you have for how to fix the problem at the Arizona border.